Wait, what's our topic again?
Negative effects of social media.
Okay, hey guys, so we're going to talk about the negative effects of social media, and next is going to be the reasons why we chose this.
Social media is relevant today because everyone uses it. It's the main source of communication and it's prevalent in society.
I want to do this topic because I have some personal experience with like the negative effects of social media because people can be anonymous and there's a lot of free usage of social media. Like Snapchat, for example, once I received a bunch of inappropriate Snapchats from someone I didn't even know, and for me that was really affecting.
And we think that there's a lot of other examples of situations like this, and it's just something that needs to be discussed more, and so that's what we were hoping to do with this video, is just kind of bring to light some of the situations that have to do with social media and psychology.
This experiment focused on media multitasking, which is when a person uses more than one form of social media, and psychosocial dysfunctions such as depression and social phobia. To calculate depression and social phobia, participants took a patient health questionnaire and a social phobia inventory. To calculate media multitasking and media use, participants took the Media Multitasking Index questionnaire. In the Media Multitasking Index, it asked the patients how many hours they spent per week using 12 different forms of social media, such as watching television, emailing others, or text messaging. Media multitasking was then compared with the depression and social anxiety questionnaires, and they found that media multitasking is associated with depression and social phobia, although media use in general is not associated with social anxiety. They also found that it is a possibility that people who are depressed or anxious use media multitasking as a distraction.
So, in my article, my author was searching to see if there was a correlation between life satisfaction and social media. So what he did to figure this out was he took users on Facebook and had them take polls, and he was polling their statuses for a year and determining if they were negative or positive and what their surveys and polls were saying. And so what he found with this was it confirmed his hypothesis that negative emotional statuses correlated with subjective well-being, but positive emotional statuses did not. So this means that people, when they were being more negative on Facebook, that meant that their life actually was more negative. So expressions of statuses on social media can have indirect effects of life satisfaction during times of life, such as different situations that are happening, which can affect altogether life satisfaction, which can kind of make it hard to determine how their life satisfaction is going. But people were found to use more positive words, actually 2 times as often as negative, and people have been found to share more positive statuses on social media, but that does not mean that their well-being is positive. When using negative statuses, they were more often than not had a negative well-being. So it's just interesting to see the correlation that positive didn't necessarily have an impact on their well-being. It was more like a cover, but negative actually showed that when their status was negative, their life was most likely negative. Thanks.
My article is titled Too Many Friends, Too Few Likes, and it looked into evolutionary psychology and Facebook depression. It studied the link between the use of social networking sites, more specifically Facebook, and the result of spending too much time online, which they titled Facebook depression. Some psychologists have stated that Facebook isn't linked with any negative effects, but that's not what my article discussed. The main point of it was that if we want to understand new social media, we need to better understand the psychology that was given to us by natural selection. And finally, my article hypothesized that each of the following have been shown as triggers for depression. First, the more friends a user has on Facebook. 2, the more time the user spends checking and reading updates from friends. 3, how often they check Facebook. And 4, if the content of the updates tends to be that of a bragging nature. And then it concludes with directions for future research on behavioral and cognitive effects of Facebook, and overall argues that psychology needs to be relieved of its isolationism.
Was the impact of social media on adults, adolescents, and children. And this just addresses issues that people need to be aware of and educated on, and the psychological effects of these issues. So first, this author defines social media as any site on which social interaction can occur. So not just the sites that we're familiar with, like Instagram and Facebook, but it could be anything from Club Penguin or YouTube, or the sites like Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook that we are used to. One risk from this is peer-to-peer interaction, and these are online actions that mimic real-life interactions. So cyberbullying is a main peer-to-peer risk, and this causes anxiety, social isolation, depression, and even documented suicide. There's a study called Facebook Depression Diagnosis, which studied regular Facebook users and studied the classic signs of depression that accompanied each and every person who was a regular Facebook user, and symptoms such as social isolation, exaggerated need and ability for acceptance, and anxiety, just classic depression symptoms. Some personal risks of social media are a false sense of security and posting too much private information, and also social isolation. The psychological effects from these different risks, the first one is popularity and status. The effects that come from this are stress, anxiety, and depression that all stem from how many likes do I have, how many friends do I have, how many followers do I have, who commented what, which also leads to cyberbullying. Because you can be anonymous, you are more susceptible to cyberbullying, but also people are more likely to participate in it than they would in face-to-face interactions, which causes depression and social anxiety. There's also an increased security and risky behavior, so things you are willing to do that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, which psychologically affects you as well as whoever you might be interacting with. There's also long-term effects of sexual abuse, inappropriate content on social media, and the psychological effects of that are long-lasting as well. So the article as a whole was just to create awareness for the psychological effects that come with social media if you're not careful and you don't know what's out there and what you could be exposing yourself to.
Ready? Go. I learned that media multitasking is associated with social anxiety and depression, but media use in general is not.
Okay, so I learned that you can use social media as like a diagnostic tool to determine how someone's life is going, use it as a diagnostic tool.
Thank you. This video made me reflect more on what social media actually does in our lives, and like that's something that like I've thought about a lot, is the fact that social media does make an impact, but like doing more research and reading my article made me realize that like it actually can lead to like depression and things, and that's something you kind of need to be aware of when handling social media.
Thanks. Similar to Bailey's, just like there's actual psychological disorders and effects that come from social media, and you don't think that it could really affect you that much, and we like to pretend it doesn't, and that there's only like a few people who that happens to, but I think it happens to all of us to some extent, and it's really important to be aware of that and educated in that.
Wait, when are we gonna stop and smile?
3, 2, 1. Oh.